Hello guys, welcome back to Echelon's Hub. I'm here today to talk to you about the Omloop Het Nieuwblad 2020. It was one of the last Cobble Classics that we've had this season, and it was a great show and preview of what we were supposed to have this spring, but hopefully we'll have in this fall. The race was reminiscent of the whole Tour de Flanders parcours. It has the Muir and Bosberg combination near the end to close it off after a set of bergs and cobblestones. The big favorites for this day were Greg Van Avermaet and Matteo Trentin, the leaders of CCC. We had Wout van Aert and the Koenig riders always there present as Zdeněk Štýbar, Kasper Asgreen, Yves Lampaert, Bob Jungels. And we went into today for a day with a lot of rain, a lot of cold weather, very harsh conditions. We had the breakaway of Manuel Aguaro, Matteo Jorgensen, Sanne Leisen, Luis Masbonnet, and Mathis Paschens. It was a breakaway that was interrupted by a trail railing actually. There were splits early on in the cobble section as we see Mats Pedersen, Niels Pollitt leading up the group. There were very threatening riders in here as Stuyven, Zdeněk Štýbar, Tim Wellens. Very early on there were gaps made, there were splits, and very dangerous situation. It was CCC was leading the peloton as they had the two of the biggest candidates and still firepower to chase. That group eventually came back together, although it was from a lot of effort, and very early on the race had imploded and damage was being done, domestiques were being lost. The first big move came with 90 kilometers to go. Jasper Stuyven was the one that made the move in the Lever with Michael Valgren, Ties Benoit, and Richel Stoer very attentive in there. The gaps were made in there. It came back together once again, but very shortly after there were a very exposed section. Crosswinds were there were plenty of splits in the peloton, and once again the race was completely turned upside down. If you notice closely, Stuyven again made this move happen pretty much. He was there in front. Bora and the Koenig were leading up the charges very powerfully. You can clearly see the strong wind from the side, and here Yves Lampaert here near the front, Wout van Aert, Ollie Nijssen was there, Greg Van Avermaet was. And you can see the Koenig's commitment to make this happen. Eventually this move also came back together, but the decisive move came afterwards. 72 kilometers to go. We have a group of 4 riders here attacking, Soren Kragh Andersen included. Tim de Klerk, Frederik Frison, Mac Tunnison were there, and you see the 3 riders in the back were Stuyven, Lampaert, and Trentin. This was the decisive moment of the race. This is where they attacked. They saw a big group getting away, a large tailwind section that was essentially starting to happen at this moment, and plenty of teams represented in here. You know, you've got Jumbo, Sunweb, Lotto, the Koenig, CCC, Trek. Basically all of the big teams were covered in this move, and there were not many riders that could chase at this moment, and there weren't many teams interested in doing so. At this moment you see the gap really building up, and you see the peloton way in the back, no one really chasing. It reminds me of Peter Sagan's move in Paris-Roubaix 2018, where it was seizing the opportunity. An attack came completely unexpectedly, and he linked up to a group that was in front, that was still part of the breakaway with Diallo Valles and Sylvain Dillier at the time. It's a very similar move that happened here with favorable conditions. It's a very good idea to really attack from far, try to link up with riders in front and try to collaborate at this point. In the back, it's always going to be a messy situation because of the classics. Another thing that was in this day, as I pointed out in my preview at the time, is there was a very strong tailwind for most of the finale of this race, meaning that long distance moves could really pay up, and you could see how the group was collaborating. The peloton was never really far. It was Ineos who was chasing, pretty much the only team that was left out that had big riders. They had Gianni Moscon, they had Jens Stannard, here it's Luke Rowe making up the chase, and eventually they burned themselves up completely. They didn't get any result. They didn't get away from the peloton. They got nothing from this day, but they kept it on his own. Some riders eventually attacked when Ineos had nothing left, and Wout van Aert and Ties Benoit did the same. Both had riders in front, but both made their move in here to try to get a minor result, and still trying to get a victory perhaps, although it was really hard to do so at the time. They eventually linked up with the group that was right in front of them. Wout van Aert had a teammate in there, and it was a very similar situation to what we had seen previously, where It was a case of linking up with riders that were already escaped, and there were favorable conditions for it, so they did so. Henry Schausler was also here. It was Ankorn that was there for Wout van Aert, Dries van Gestel, Lucas Postelberger, plenty of strong riders. In the Muur then, in the front group, it was all about the front group at this point. The victory was here. We saw Tim de Klerk and Frison being left behind. Mike Tennyson also giving it a crack in here, and Matteo Trentin was also struggling. Lampard was leading the group up the Muur at the first hand, and this wasn't even an attack. Stuyven and Lampard went side by side like Bonen and Kenshar in 2010 up the steepest gradient. Soren Krag was being left behind, and these two were absolutely sprinting up the cobblestones. Trentin was left behind out of the saddle, the only one in this section. Stuyven was driving it in front. Krag Andersen was making the effort to not be left behind in here. Eventually it did so. Trentin was struggling here. He wasn't cracking, but he didn't have the legs to keep up with the pace in front. Stuyven was going up this last pitch, and you could see that he was the strongest rider in here. Lampard couldn't get through him, and Stuyven had a strong sprint, so he knew that if he'd done this, he would put himself in a very good position to win. Main goal here was to distance also Trentin, as he was the strongest sprinter. He couldn't be in the front group, as he would become automatically the big favorite to win. Stuyven and Lampard went over the Muur with Krag Andersen right behind. He had difficulties keeping up, but he managed to. In the final climb up to the Bosberg, it was a slog up. It's not a climb that's favorable for big attacks. It's one that you have to grind up, and Trentin was right behind the group. It was only a matter of 10 seconds or so in here. You could see them right there in front, and Stuyven was driving it once again. Lampard seemed to want to attack, but he couldn't get out of the group here really. The pace was really high. It was a very, very hard race, and you could see really the consequences of here. They couldn't get a very strong peak of power in this climb. It was the last of many. They were going over 500 watts, and you're going to see here Soren Krag Andersen pull a sneaky move. The cameras didn't catch it very well, but he tried an attack there over the top. It's a very clever move that sometimes works. It's a very using the sense of opportunity, attacking where they weren't expecting. The cameras unfortunately didn't catch it very well, but both Lampard and Stuyven reacted to it very quickly. Trentin was going over the top, and here in front, the free riders were settling themselves as they were heading for a win. They had to keep working to prevent Trentin from coming back, and they were doing a good job. They had a 16-second gap at this point, and as you can see, they were working pretty well together, and they weren't going easy at all. They knew that they had to keep pushing, otherwise they would have a company that would jeopardize their chances of winning. And here we got the final 2.5 kilometers. It's where the important moves came, like the most important. If you take a look at here at what Yves Lampard is going to do, is an expert move. It shows that he knows this finish and he knows what he was going to do. He's a very smart classics rider, and you see the experience from this type of attack they just did here. 2.3 kilometers to go. He goes wide and he comes from the inside. He sees that it's Andersen on the wheel. He attacks immediately since he knows that Stuyven is the one who needs to be distanced. Quickly here, Andersen shows that he can't keep up with Lampard's attack, but Stuyven shows the strongest legs, and he shows here that he was set to take the win for sure, because this was Lampard's big move, and he counterattacked right over him. As we're going to see now, he quickly jumped onto his wheel and he wasn't on the limit. He still went again, and he showed here that he had a little bit extra than Lampard. Andersen was distanced at this point. Stuyven went. He looked behind. I think he only didn't win in this attack because he didn't commit to it 100%. He looked back, he saw that Lampard was there not far away, and he didn't keep up with the move. However, the both of them kept working. They kept working solid so they would battle it out for themselves for the win and not have the Danes' company. And then it was a game of cat and mouse pretty much. Stuyven didn't break at all. He tapered onto the final kilometers and he went into the sprint first. Lampard here tried to surprise, but Stuyven was right on him. He didn't give him any opportunity to be surprised. And after 5 hours, Stuyven clearly had the strongest sprint. He was the strongest rider of the day, and not only the strongest, he was the smartest. He took a win in Omloop. It was a breakthrough win pretty much. Although he's had some very good wins, This was powerful and a dominant win. There was a lot of confidence, not only from him but from the team. Soundcrack finished third, and Matteo Trentin eventually finished fourth. You see him now coming over to the line. It was a very painful day for him. CCC played their cards very well, but Trentin didn't have the legs when it mattered the most. I think both Trentin and Stuyven are maybe the two biggest favorites to win either Roubaix or Flanders. One of them they are sure to take. They are very strong riders, they're very intelligent, and they're very aggressive, the both of them. And seeing here in the back, it was the remnants of that leading group that was still making it to the finish, proving that it was indeed the right move to go very early on. You have Tim de Klerk, Mike Tunis, and Frederick Frison still holding up the bunch. De Klerk and Tunison eventually still managed to hold clear of the group, where you have Oliver Neisen and Philippe Gilbert, the ones finishing the sprint the strongest. It was a nice surprise to see Philippe Gilbert still in here. I had my doubts that he was still at his best this season with this switch to Lotto, but he showed very good legs in here and a lot of confidence. Jasper Stuyven so took the win, and seeing this makes me very excited for what's to come still late in this fall. Well, hopefully. And seeing Jasper Stuyven and Trek coming in with such a strong team with Stuyven, Pedersen, Kirch, and several other riders, with such a youngster like Quinn Simmons also coming from the junior rank, it gives a lot of excitement and future prosperity for Trek. If you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.